Thank you. Let's talk about worship after that. And just so you know, this service is sponsored by the Lefevre's family, so I'm just kidding, that's not a thing. But good morning, everyone. I'm so grateful to be with you this morning. As Ryan mentioned back in June, my husband and I spoke during service about the Bible and masculinity. We talked about the different ways that sometimes people use Jesus as justification for, ironically, negative behavior. One of the references that I made was in the book of Revelation, where Christ is being depicted as a warrior with a sword in his mouth. It was in that talk that I publicly referred to the book of Revelation as an incredibly confusing fever dream. Flash forward 1 week, Ryan approached me and said, "Hey, you want to do an entire talk about Revelation?" So today we're going to embrace the fever dream, and I'm honestly glad that Ryan asked because it forced me to dig into the book in a way that I had not done before. So today we're going to be focusing on 2 chapters, chapters 4 and 5. But before we read the actual text, I want to walk you through the high-level view of what's taking place. It's really easy to get lost in these chapters. Really, it's easy to get lost in all of Revelation. It's just details after details after details. And so you can easily kind of wander off the path if you're trying to navigate through. But to recap what we covered last week, chapter 3, John was continuing his letters to the 7 churches. John concludes with the letter to the church of Laodicea. And it's not a friendly letter. It's not like, hey, how you doing, buddies? He scolds them about their indifference. He puts them in their place. At one point, he compares them to lukewarm water, which I thought was very creative. So that's where we left off. Now we're going to move into chapter 4, where he's addressing all of the churches. We're going to hear him tell us about a prophecy he experienced, where he heard a voice invite him into the heavenly throne room. All of the details described, and there will be many, many details, there's gemstones and so forth, they're meant to paint a picture of grandeur and majesty and otherworldliness. So just keep that in mind as we're reading. So in this heavenly throne room, there's a central throne with someone on it wearing a crown. And then there are other beings surrounding the throne, and they're worshiping. Let's read. And our friend John has a lot to say, so stick with me. Then as I looked, I saw a door standing open in heaven, and the same voice I had heard before spoke to me like a trumpet blast. The voice said, "Come up here, and I will show you what must happen after this." And instantly, I was in the Spirit. To clarify, that means experiencing a prophecy. And I saw a throne in heaven and someone sitting on it. The one sitting on the throne was as brilliant as gemstones, like jasper and carnelian. And a glow of emerald circled his throne like a rainbow. 24 thrones surrounded him, and 24 elders sat on them. They were all clothed in white and had gold crowns on their heads. From the throne came flashes of lightning and a rumble of thunder. And in front of the throne, there were 7 torches with burning flames. This is the sevenfold Spirit of God. In front of the throne was a shiny sea of glass sparkling like crystal. In the center and around the throne were 4 living beings, each covered in eyes front and back. The first of these living beings was like a lion, the second was like an ox, the third had a human face, and the fourth was like an eagle in flight. Each of these living beings had 6 wings, and their wings were covered all over with eyes inside and out. We are 100% coming back to that, by the way. Day after day and night after night, they kept on saying, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God, the Almighty, the one who was, who is, and who is to come." Whenever the living beings give glory and honor and thanks to the one sitting on the throne, the one who lives forever and ever. The 24 elders fall down and worship the one sitting on the throne, the one who lives forever and ever. And they lay their crowns before the throne and say, "You are worthy, O Lord our God, to receive glory and honor and power. For you created all things, and they exist because you created what you pleased." There's a lot to unpack here. Do you see what I mean about getting lost in the details? It's incredibly detailed compared to the way that other books in the Bible are written. It's full of metaphors and references to other parts of the Bible, and we don't actually even have enough time to talk about all of the metaphors and all of the references. The amount of footnotes in the different study Bibles, it was intense. It actually made me think of the conspiracy theory meme from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, so we can pull that up on the screen. And I did custom make this, by the way. I'm very proud of it. I'm basically a graphic designer now. But Revelation 4 references Ezekiel 1, and then when you go and look at Ezekiel 1, that's referencing Isaiah 6, and the entire chapter is like this. You have to kind of make this map of yarn to connect the stories together. But getting serious, I read multiple translations of these chapters because every translation has a different flavor. And so, we have 5 different Bibles at our house, each a different translation, and you can read through each of them and figure out which one tastes the best. So I was reading through the different translations, and one theme really started to stand out to me. Above all of the details, there was a theme. The invitation to worship God is inclusive. This is an incredibly inclusive chapter. There are 4 different creatures that are meant to represent the diversity of life, and they're worshiping together side by side. One can assume that the creatures spoke different languages, they lived different lives. As you may know, an ox lives a very different life from a human. And yet here they are, after all of this has ended, and they're equal to one another. They're collectively worthy to sit before the throne and worship. They are also covered in eyes. That part is not meant to be taken literally. So let's go ahead and dig into what the eyes are, because that's really kind of the first point in Revelation where things get a little weird. Spoiler alert for the rest of the book, it's going to get weirder. One scholar wrote that the eyes represent the inability to hide anything from God, that he sees us for who we are fully. There was a more fear-based translation that was similar to that, but those are the eyes that judge us upon death. And then the one that resonated most with me was that the eyes represent the ever-presence of God. Let's also chat about the 24 elders sitting on the 24 thrones. I really like that John includes it's 24 elders and 24 thrones. Like everyone has a place to sit, so there isn't someone like standing awkwardly in the corner. That wouldn't be very heavenly. So these 24 elders also continue to fit into the theme of inclusiveness. One interpretation suggests that this is the whole people of God. It's the 12 tribes of Israel and the 12 apostles. So there's the Old Testament and the New Testament represented. Another interpretation suggests that they may refer to the 24 priestly families that are noted in Isaiah and Chronicles. But whoever they are, the way they worship is very striking. They chant and they fall down in praise. This room has music and movement, not to mention the atmosphere. There's thunder and lightning and gemstones and light. There's a lot going on in this room, and yet it's all in harmony with one another. It's an all-encompassing worship. Christopher Rowland is an Anglican priest and a theologian who's written numerous books, including the introduction, commentary, and reflections on the book of Revelation. It's like this thick, by the way. About chapter 4, he writes, Worship plays a central role in Revelation. There is the all-encompassing participation of the worshipers. We can too readily dismiss the affective and confine worship to verbal or intellectual expression. Physical and sensory participation in worship are all important components of the worship of God. So it's a very strange scene that we're in. And I don't know about you, but I can visualize the heavenly throne room. I can visualize the worship. But I have a really hard time seeing myself in that throne room, worshiping that way. And that doesn't mean that I don't think that I'm getting into heaven or that I'm into this heavenly throne room. I really hope that I am. But the concept of full body, full sensory worship feels distant to me. And I've been a worship leader for 15 years, so just throwing that out there. We're going to revisit this in a moment, but let's also take a look at chapter 5. We'll continue to see the theme. To summarize how the prophecy continues, we're in the throne room, there's worshiping going on. Then John sees a lamb appear, a lamb that appears to have been slaughtered. It's written that he, the lamb, had 7 horns and 7 eyes, which represented the sevenfold Spirit of God that is sent out to every part of the earth. I'm going to repeat that because it's really important. The Spirit of God that is sent out into every part of the earth. As kind of an aside on the lamb with the 7 horns, one of the translations that I read included a footnote on that part, so I naturally followed it down. And the footnote read, lambs, male lambs, can have 2 horns, but not 7. Like that was literally the footnote in the study Bible. But it didn't say anything about the 7 eyes. So, biology might be wrong. Anyway, the lamb is in the throne room, and it steps forward to the throne and takes a scroll from the one sitting on the throne. And when it takes the throne, all of the beings in the room start worshiping again. This time with harps and with gold bowls full of incense. And they sing a new song. You are worthy to take the scroll and break its seals and open it. For you were slaughtered, and your blood has ransomed people for God, from every tribe and language and people and nation. And you have caused them to become a kingdom of priests for our God, and they will reign on earth. John then continues to say that he heard 1,000,000 angels singing. And they continue with singing, worthy is the Lamb who was slaughtered to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. He then goes on to say, in addition to the 24, elders plus the 4 beings, plus the 1,000,000 angels, he hears every creature in heaven and on earth and under the sea and in the sea. And they sang, blessing and honor and glory and power belong to the one sitting on the throne and to the Lamb forever and ever. So here we have chapter 4, which we read first, and they're singing praise to the creator of all. Then we transition into chapter 5, and we see them worshiping and praising the Redeemer of all. The praise is sung by everyone present in all their diversity. One of the commentaries noted that this is as universalistic a picture of the saving act of God as any in the Bible. I do want to give you a heads up that the theme of inclusiveness is going to get a little bit murky after these chapters. As I mentioned before, things are going to get weird. But in the end, it's going to come back. And in the end, we're going to read about every nation coming to the New Jerusalem to be with God. And all of the tribes and all of the people and all of the languages will be standing before the throne. Earlier, I mentioned that it's hard for me to picture myself in the throne room. The idea of full body worship, this concept of complete and emotional surrender, it can feel very distant to someone who has deconstructed their faith. It can feel distant even for someone who has deconstructed and reconstructed, such as myself. And after reading these 2 chapters, it got me thinking, what does it mean to worship after you've deconstructed and reconstructed your faith? Some of you may know that I grew up Catholic. When I was a teenager, my family attended an extremely unique Catholic church here in the Valley. It was almost a megachurch. There were over 6,000 families that went to this church, and there was a strong emphasis on passionate, full-body worship. At retreats, sometimes people spoke in tongues. During the masses, it was incredibly lively. The masses actually had amazing music. It was super lively, super high quality. The first song that we sang today, As It Is in Heaven, and then one of the songs that we sang last week, Clean Heart, those are both by Matt Maher. And Matt Maher was one of the worship leaders at this church. So it was basically a concert, like every Sunday. It was great. But you get the picture. It was lively music. People lifted their hands in praise. People sang their hearts out. And when I started to more critically analyze my religion, I pretty quickly found that my faith went with that. That's pretty common with deconstructing. You pull apart the institution, and then you just keep going. So it's very, very existential. You have to just kind of completely break it down. About 5 years after that, I've been away from faith, not just religion, but I've been away from faith. I was able to circle back to Christianity, broadly speaking. It took a surprisingly long time to separate the man-made institution from the words and life of Jesus. And when I finally got there, I found that I couldn't quite worship the way that I had before. I started grappling with 2 questions as part of my reconstruction process. What is worship, and what is the point of worship? One of the main things that expanded my comfort with worship was learning the concepts of vertical worship and horizontal worship. We can go ahead and pull up that slide. There we go. So very evangelical churches tend to lean toward the vertical. It's all about God. Many Christians believe that worship should only be about God. Some song examples include Great Are You, Lord, Mighty to Save, How Great Is Our God. And those are really good songs, by the way. I want to make it clear that I'm not against vertical worship. I do think it's important. But I found that I need worship to be more holistic than that. Within vertical worship songs, it's easy to mistake worship as being for God, that God needs to be reminded who God is. He is great, He is powerful, He is mighty. But we don't include worship to remind God of who God is. We worship to remind ourselves who God is and who our neighbor is. We do it so that we can plug back into the story that we're a part of, the story that started long before we were here, and the story that's going to continue long after. Music and worship is a way for us to be part of that. That's where horizontal worship comes in. You love God and you love your neighbor. It's all connected. Here at the Well, we sing a nice blend of both the vertical and the horizontal. And some of the song examples of the horizontal kind include Keep Us All Close, so we sing that one pretty often, Walk in Love, All Belong Here. I think I sang that one like 2 weeks ago, maybe. As a plug, if you are looking for a progressive Christian music, Susie, if you want to go ahead and put the slide up, If you're looking for progressive Christian music that includes both a blend of vertical and horizontal worship, Matt, who is just up here, he actually manages one of the most popular playlists on Spotify within that genre. So it has a lot of the songs that we play here at the Well. And if you're interested in checking it out, you can take out your smartphone, and in theory, you can hold the camera up and it should read this and then link you to the playlist. If that doesn't work, I'm also going to paste it into the Facebook group, and then I know that David is posting it into the comments on both YouTube and Facebook. So with horizontal worship, we have a picture of loving God through loving our neighbor. This is something that a lot of progressive Christians find more comforting or more accessible compared to only singing vertical worship songs. I want to also talk about the diversity that's represented in vertical worship. So one way that if you've deconstructed and you've reconstructed, you may not be comfortable singing a lot of the vertical worship songs. But one way to reconnect with this type of song is to take the certainty out of it. So it can feel misguided if you are singing a song that says, I know exactly who God is. Like it can feel inauthentic if you're not there. And I love that mystics and contemplatives throughout centuries have also felt that way. This is not a new thing of not quite knowing God. And so it's okay for us to sing about uncertainty. There's no way for our minds to contain who God is. And we can find comfort in the fact that we don't need to know in this life. Vapor, the other song that we sang this morning, is a great example of worshiping through the mystery of God. As I start to close things out, I want to touch on progressive Christian music and deconstructed worship in popular Christian music. So think K-Love or Air One. Those are the radio stations if you're familiar with them. There are so many people across the world who have not gone through the deconstruction process or who have not been hurt by a church, and they think it's impossible for them. In preparation for this talk, I watched a sermon. I don't recommend watching the sermon that I watched, but the pastor said that deconstruction is a fad, and that if you were truly touched by Jesus, you wouldn't have deconstructed. Makes you pretty glad to be at the Well, huh? He said that, and I was like, ugh, that felt gross. So to that comment, I say, let's look at the gifted people who have dedicated their entire lives to the worship of God. There are many, many, many Christian singers and songwriters who have had to pull apart their faith and put it back together again. Audrey Assad, probably most famously Michael Gungor, Lecrae, those are just to name a few. I actually want to show a video that covers a little bit of Lecrae's story. So if you don't know who he is a Billboard charting artist. He's a rapper, a singer, a producer. The list goes on. This guy does everything. He's won a ton of awards. He's won Grammys and Doves. But he has a really beautiful way of describing worship in deconstruction. Let's watch.
You know, going through the process of honestly, the cuss word everybody hates right now, deconstruction.
Yeah.
Right? The cuss word. But
a lot of my friends are going
right
through that, to be fair. Yeah.
I was deconstructing before that was a term, right? So I went through deconstruction, but I went through reconstruction. And that's what a lot of people don't talk about.
They missed that word.
They missed that one.
Yeah.
Right? So deconstruction is not a bad thing if it leads to reconstruction, right? Sometimes you have to demolish a building that is mold, infested, and then build something else on that foundation, right? We're not getting rid of the foundation. The foundation is Christ.
Yeah.
But we're building on that foundation and tearing down some things that were unnecessary, some traditions or religiosity or rules that God never intended in the first place, and building on truth. And so the reconstruction is what got me through.
Wow.
Is realizing, oh, I don't have to embrace some of these things, right? I don't have to embrace this idea that, Sunday at 8 a.m. is the only time I can connect with God.
Yeah.
Right? That's not true. That is how many of us do that here in the Western world.
Yeah.
But that's not the only time you can connect with God. And so just realizing those things and saying, all right, well, I'm free to do that, or I'm free to not do it. I may do something at 5 p.m. on Saturday with a group of friends at the house. It's okay, like figuring that out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How have you been, last question, man, how have you been able to stay in love with Jesus, man, in the midst of the controversy, in the midst of reading the comment section, which they tell us do not read that, by the way, but we do anyway, by reading the comment section, by hearing, what may be harsh words, man, I mean, how have you been able to still love Jesus and love his people and still, navigate through all of that?
Well, I can tell you conceptually and then practically, right?
Yeah.
Conceptually, I had to realize that my people hurts cannot be God hurts. I cannot transfer the hurt I've experienced from people onto God.
Yeah.
God didn't do that to me. Jesus didn't do that to me. That was people, and people are broken. I'm one of those broken people.
Yeah.
I've hurt people before.
Yeah.
So it's recognizing and realizing that and being gracious. Sometimes being gracious means I'm going to not read what you have to say.
Yeah.
But being gracious and saying, well, these are human beings. And practically, it's been listening to the voices of people who genuinely love me, who genuinely care about me, who genuinely want to see me walk with the Lord in a healthy way, and just walking with them, turning off the noise and zeroing in on the people who love me, on Scripture, and just focusing on allowing God to do that healing work in me.
I really love the visualization of tearing down a house in order to rebuild a stronger one. I also really love the reminder about not reading the comment section. So in Revelation chapters 4 and 5, we see the creatures living their worship. There's music and their praise, but there's also movement. And what I love most is they're responding to one another. There's an exchange, a recognition of what the others are saying, and then there's the response in worship. Worship can mean more than a song. It can and should mean action. It should be all-encompassing. I want to close with a quote from Brian Serchio. So Brian is a UCC minister, and he's a musician, and he wrote this book called The 6 Marks of Progressive Christian Worship Music. So I have a copy up here if anyone wants to come through and page. It's a really good read. I strongly recommend it. He does a really nice job of capturing the ideas of what holistic worship is. So you can read along on the screen, but I also want to use this quote as our prayer because he writes it really beautifully. When we praise God, we are helped to take our eyes off ourselves and to find our own rightful place in the order and balance of the universe. Praise helps lead us into a place of gratitude and love, and that is always holy and life-giving place. Praise helps us to be humble and grateful. Praise also somehow puts us in a frame of mind, heart, and spirit in which we are more able to cooperate and co-create with God. So let's sing praise and gratitude to God with our whole beings in musical styles that touch our hearts. But let's also sing about the rest of life in relation to God's desires and intention, and about our own broken and beautiful experiences in life in all its fullness. And let's sing songs that move us to boldly respond to God's invitation to be agents of healing, love, peace, justice, and transformation.